Good afternoon, everybody. It's 4 o'clock now, so we're going to start. We want to welcome all of you who have taken time to watch this presentation today. We thank our friends, Henry and Michael, who will do the presentation. I will be introducing them shortly. And I just want to tell us that there's no need preaching to the choir. Obviously, we know that virtual arbitrations are here and they're here to stay. They're very much part of the arbitral space at this time. And so just to further equip practitioners, we put this presentation together to show us how we can conduct arbitration using Zoom. Most arbitrators are also mediators, and they're very familiar with doing mediations online. So I'm sure this may be the first time some people are seeing arbitrations done using Zoom, and I think it will be quite a learning experience. So I'm going to invite the Chairman, Nigeria Branch, Mr. Tunde Busari, SAN, Chartered Arbitrator, to just give a few welcome remarks, and we'll go straight into the event. So Busari, sir.
Thank you very much, Adeyemi. I'm happy once again to welcome all our participants and members to this webinar, the Winds of Change series, conduct of evidentiary hearings in online arbitration organized in collaboration with Breakout Associates. Now, the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators is an arbitral institute, and we are also a training institute. And the purpose of this webinar is to assist our members to seek and deploy cost-effective and innovative dispute resolution services through the use of technology in the conduct of their arbitral hearings. Now, with the pandemic, technology has become a part of everyday life in today's world, and there is a need to equip our members with requisite knowledge, skills, and proficiency in the use of virtual platforms for dispute resolution, and particularly at the hearing stage of arbitration. This webinar is intended to highlight the potential practical issues that will be encountered at hearings and how best to tackle such issues to ensure due process and party autonomy, and also in order to protect the integrity of the ADR and arbitral process. Obviously, there are questions that must be agitating our minds when we think of conduct of online hearings. Such questions will revolve around issues like handling of multiple participants, examination in chief and cross-examination of witnesses, presentation of evidence, integrity of the caucus meetings in mediation, cybersecurity, to mention but a few. These issues, I believe, will be discussed in the course of this webinar. Mindful of the needs of practitioners at this period, we have introduced various courses at the Chartered Institute designed to give practical insight into the structure and use of available virtual hearing platforms for mediation and arbitration. You will recall that the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators issued a guidance note on remote dispute resolution proceedings. And we also introduced the Big Blue Button virtual education platform to enable the remote delivery of courses. The BBB platform is now in use for most of our courses, and we are also training and issuing certification to our faculty members on the use of virtual platforms. On behalf of the organizers, Breakout Associates and the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, I want to thank in advance the panelists Henry Chalmers and Michael Acosta for honoring our invitation to share their knowledge with us on this subject. I also want to thank our own Dr. Adeyemi Agbelusi. Certainly, we will gain new knowledge and awareness on the use of virtual platforms for arbitration hearing. Lastly, I want to thank the audience, all the participants, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, my chair. Michael, if you could just do the introductions now. We'll have the slide. I'd like to introduce Henry Chalmers, who is Eric Chalmers is a litigation partner with Arnold Golden Gregory LLP, Washington, D.C. and Atlanta. He's an arbitrator with the American Arbitration Association and is a co-chair, American Bar Association, Section of Litigation, Alternative Dispute Resolution Committee. He has wide experience representing clients in very high value cases, and he has been counsel and arbitrator in several proceedings. He will be sharing knowledge with us today on the conduct of virtual proceedings using Zoom, and also we'll be taking a lot of the Q&A. Thank you very much for coming, Henry.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Okay then. Michael is a remote video support provider and is the founder of Virtual Mediation Hosting. He trains mediators, arbitrators, and other professionals to be comfortable and competent using Zoom. He hosts mediations and arbitrations and will provide technical support and real-time assistance. He has very wide knowledge in the industry, and we hope that he will be able to take much of our questions today. And we want to welcome you once again, Michael Thomas.
Thank you.
Okay. So without much ado, I think we'll just go straight into today's presentation.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Agbelusi, and welcome everyone. We're excited to be meeting with you for this next hour. So we are going to talk with you about some of the practicalities and practical advice for running an arbitration using Zoom. First, let me discuss a few preliminaries, things that you will want to have addressed prior to the arbitration starting. One is you want to make sure you have the correct equipment. I'm sure that this is old news for many of you. You will want a PC or a laptop. You will need a webcam so that you can see and people can see you, and you will want a microphone so that you can actually verbally communicate with the participants. We find it's often very helpful to have a second monitor in addition to the monitor on your laptop or PC. That way you can see the participants on one monitor, and on the other monitor you can see real-time transcription if you're using that, or you can see documents. You can also communicate with other people and within your arbitration panel. Two warnings: the Microsoft products with the S operating systems, such as a Microsoft Surface, they are currently unable to host Zoom, so we would recommend not using those until that functionality changes. Second is Apple tablets and Apple cell devices are unable to host an arbitration Zoom. You can participate in a Zoom, but you can't host it using those technologies, so we would recommend against them. In terms of platforms, there's many options. We strongly believe that Zoom is the best platform to use for conducting an arbitration, and that's what we recommend, and that's why this entire presentation is geared around Zoom. You can use WebEx or GoToMeeting or a number of other different platforms. They all have their drawbacks. Some have their advantages, but we will focus on Zoom today. Another thing you will want to address well before the arbitration hearing begins is to make sure that you are legally able to conduct the arbitration virtually. That means you have to make sure that the rules of the administrative body overseeing the arbitration permit it. I know that the International Centers for Dispute Resolution, the International Chamber of Commerce, both allow virtual arbitrations. Just make sure that whatever administrative body you're operating under allows it. Second, you will want to make sure that the law of the forum allows for it. I'm not aware of any forum, any state or any country that prohibits arbitrations to be conducted virtually, but I have not done a survey. So just make sure that there is no prohibition on that or no restrictions. And finally, make sure that the parties have agreed to allow the arbitration to be conducted virtually, and you will want to see some sort of written confirmation of that agreement. The last thing to discuss before we discuss the actual running of the arbitration is the use of third-party support. Whatever administrative body may be involved in your arbitration can give you some support there. They can host the Zoom meeting if you would like. I have found and strongly advocate use of a third-party remote video support provider like Michael, like my colleague. This person can handle all the technological side of an arbitration, which means that they can handle the invitations, the passwords, receiving all the exhibits and documents, making sure that they're marked. During the arbitration, they can be the gatekeeper for having documents appear on the screen. If a witness or if a party advocate wants to make annotations to a document, they can ensure that that revised document becomes a new exhibit. They can oversee placing people into breakout rooms and waiting rooms. Essentially what they do is they take a lot of the burden off of you of running the technological side of the arbitration so that you can focus all of your attention on the attorneys and the witnesses. Michael can address some of the specific things he does as a remote video support provider, and then we will launch into how to actually run an arbitration. Michael?
Yeah, thanks, Henry. I think you touched on it pretty well. The main benefits of having a remote video support provider is that you don't have to worry about technology at all while hosting your own arbitration. So that anywhere from exhibits to actually admitting and managing all the participants of the meeting, the remote video support provider takes all of that off of your plate, if you will. So you can really focus on the matter at hand, being either the arbitrator or the hearing officer. So you touched on most of it, and then we'll get more into it as we go through our demonstrations in a couple minutes here.
Good. So now the day of the arbitration is approaching. There are a few things that you want to do prior to that day. One is to have all the parties submit to you the exhibits pre-marked. As with any arbitration, you would like them to resolve authentication and admissibility issues in advance. If you do use a remote video support provider, they can submit all those documents to a Dropbox or to some other mechanism so that remote video support provider can arrange the documents to make sure they're all ready to be used. You want to have a complete list of participants. Each person who will be attending, you want to know their affiliation, their contact information, including an additional cell phone number in case they need to be contacted if the technology is not working. And then the invitation will be sent to them with a password. This again is something that can be handled by a third-party service provider, or it can be handled by the administrative body or by you. And finally, we find it's very helpful to run a pre-arbitration technical conference. And what this means is the day or two before the arbitration, each attorney should have the attorney's technological support staff, or the attorney himself or herself, have a conference with the administrative body or with the arbitrators or with the remote video support provider to make sure documents are appearing correctly, that they have the right technological connection. That way, when the morning of the arbitration begins, everything is worked out, there are no kinks in the system, and you can go straight into the arbitration. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Michael, and Michael is going to talk about some of the specific practicalities and processes for running an arbitration via Zoom. Michael?
Thank you. So we're going to start with a couple demonstrations. I know some of this will be redundant to those of you who have hosted mediations in the past, but they are basics that we need to learn before hosting our own arbitration. And so what I'm going to explain to you today is if you are hosting your own arbitration, normally a lot of the things covered today would be provided by a remote video support provider like myself. So we'll start with the waiting room and participant controls. So here we are in our make-believe Zoom meeting that I made for the purpose of demonstration. Talking about the waiting room is our most powerful security check. No one can be admitted to the meeting except through the waiting room by the host. So you'll see on our right, we already have one person waiting in our meeting. We're going to wait for 2 people to join, and then you'll see we have the ability to either admit them individually or admit them all at once. So once again, the waiting room is powerful because you have complete control over who joins the meeting through the waiting room. So we'll go ahead and click Admit All. Once our participants are in our meeting, we'll talk about the basic Zoom controls, talking specifically about our Zoom toolbar. Great, our participants are now in the meeting. We'll start on the bottom left with our mute button. Inside this mute button, we have different controls that are seen if you click the caret on the mute button. Those controls include adjusting your audio settings for the Zoom application, selecting which speaker or which device you'd like to play the sound. We'll see it here. We can test our speaker and microphone. We can even switch to a phone call for audio, but all of our audio settings can be found in the mute button. The start and stop video, similarly, has all of our video controls. So we'll note when we click this caret, we can choose our virtual background, select which camera we're using, and change more video settings. Moving on to the security button, which is a button that's only visible to hosts, we can see different security in meeting controls. Locking meeting, for instance, I find redundant because we have our waiting room enabled. But this is where we can allow our participants to share their screen, chat, and rename themselves. Those are all pretty important things during the meeting. Moving on from our security button, we have our participants button directly next to it. This button is very powerful, especially when we talk about breakout rooms. When you click the participant button, you will always see the participants who are currently in the room with you. So if you're in a breakout room, it won't be all of the participants, just the participants with you. So we'll see here, because we are in what Zoom calls the main session, we see all of our participants. On the bottom of our participant window, we have all participant controls like mute all and unmute themselves. The button right next to that is unmute all, so we can unmute all of our participants. And then the button directly next to that is more, which are just more in-meeting participant controls. Normally, these controls will not be manipulated during the course of a regular meeting. So if we mouse over the names of our participants on our participant list, we'll see that we have individual participant controls. Those controls include chatting, asking to start or stop their video, making them host and co-host, renaming them, and putting them in the waiting room, removing or reporting them. Once you remove a participant, this should be the last step. They will not be able to rejoin the meeting whatsoever. So once you remove them, they're gone. That's important to note. So that wraps up our portion on participant control. The next thing that we're going to talk about is breakout rooms, which are very important for arbitrations and also for mediations, frankly. Normally for breakout rooms, I create hearing room and then different conference rooms for different sidebars or private conversations that have to happen. So we'll walk through what it's like to set up the breakout rooms. To begin, we click the breakout room button on the bottom of our screen. Once we click that button, Zoom will ask us how we'd like to set up the rooms and how many. So here we can select how many rooms we'd like to set up and whether or not we want Zoom to split up our participants or if we want to. So we'll click this manually button here. Once we're ready with the correct number of rooms, we'll select Create Breakout Rooms. We're now in our breakout room control panel where we have the ability to rename the rooms, delete them, and assign participants. This is how I normally name the rooms when I create rooms for a arbitration. The names are a little less important, but I find that being organized is very important. Once we have created all the names for the rooms, we'll move on to the options of breakout rooms, which is the button in the bottom left of this window. This is normally you set it once and you don't have to in the future. I make sure this top button is clicked, move all participants into breakout rooms automatically. This removes the need for the participants to click through and click to join the room. While this window is open, it's important to note that once we open all the breakout rooms, we are not able to add a room or rename them. So I'll add one last room while we still can. Once the rooms are all created and named appropriately, we have the ability to assign our participants. Once we click assign, we'll see a list of all of our available participants to the right. So we'll assign one person to the hearing room and one person to conference room 1. You'll notice when we click conference room 1, the list is smaller. Each participant can only be assigned to one breakout room at a time. Once our participants are all assigned, we'll click Open All Rooms. This opens all the breakout rooms and immediately moves our participants into the breakout rooms. You'll see now that they are listed under their breakout room. To join the breakout room as the host, you simply click the Join button next to the breakout room you'd like to join and confirm by clicking Yes. We now move into that breakout room, which we'll see in a moment. And then once we click the Participants button on the bottom of the screen, you'll notice that we only see one other participant listed. And that's because, once again, this Participants button will only show people who are currently in the breakout room with you. Now we're going to reopen our breakout room control panel to move our other participant. To move them into this room, you simply click Move To, and then select the room you want to move them to. Since we're in the room that we just moved that participant to, we see them appear on the right in our participants list. Once we're done moving all of our participants around, if we want to have a joint session with all of our participants, we have the option of closing all the breakout rooms. When we close all the breakout rooms, participants get a warning that they have 60 seconds to return to the main session, or they can return manually immediately. So we'll go ahead and return to the main session. Once all of the participants return to the main session, we have the ability to reopen the breakout rooms. If we reopen the breakout rooms, Zoom will remember where each participant was and reassign them to that specific room. This is important if we need to have a joint session. We don't have to re-click and assign everyone to their rooms again. We click open all rooms and they immediately go back to the room that they were already assigned to. This is the basic controls of breakout rooms. So we'll go ahead and close the breakout rooms again and bring everyone back to the main session. Just a quick reminder, the way Zoom organizes breakout rooms, the main purpose of the breakout room was to have one main meeting room and then smaller rooms where private conversations can happen. If you are in a breakout room, you are in a private, secure space. You cannot be seen or heard by anyone that is not in the room with you. So clicking that participants button will always tell you who can see you and who can hear you. Moving on from breakout rooms, we're going to talk briefly about exhibits and e-bundles. This is an area where I find that the remote video support provider is especially helpful. So I've created a slide that shows what it's like with a remote video support provider and then what it's like to host your own arbitration. It is easier with a remote video support provider, but definitely not impossible to run on your own. The difference is mainly that the remote video support provider handles all technical aspects of the exhibits. Your participants or parties will send the documents either to the remote video support provider or to you as the arbitrator. Then as the arbitrator, you will rule on the admissibility and you will label each exhibit with an exhibit number that is unique to that exhibit. This is important when we talk about annotation in a couple minutes here. Now, the difference is that if you use a remote video support provider, they will create and manage the shared folder and share that information with all participants that are privy to that knowledge. Versus you doing it yourself, you can use a software like Dropbox or Google Drive and share that link with your participants. Sharing the link makes sure that they can use it to pull up on their own screen share in Zoom. So I'll give a little demonstration on how to share the screen with Zoom. The most important thing to note about screen sharing is that the document that you wish to share needs to be open on your computer before attempting to initiate the screen share. You'll see on the left side of my screen, I have a document open in the background already. So when I click the share screen button, it appears as an option that I can share. Now, if you want to share a video clip, it's important to click these two buttons on the bottom of the screen that say share computer sound and optimize screen share for video clip. This ensures that participants can hear the video and also that the video is not laggy or glitchy at all. So once we're ready, we'll select the document we wish to share and click the share button. You'll notice once we start a screen share, the area that's visible to all the participants is outlined in green. And you'll also see in the upper right-hand corner of the exhibit itself, there is a stamp with the exhibit number. On the top of our screen, we have all of our meeting controls that have now moved. We can still manage our breakout rooms. We can manage the annotation. We can hide our controls. We can share our computer sound. Or if we didn't click that optimize video for screen share, we can click it now. So moving on to annotations, which is the most powerful part of screen sharing, you'll see that we have lots of options, including highlighting our mouse to draw more attention to the part that we wish. We also have the ability to draw. And drawing is great if you want to draw a witness's attention to a particular paragraph. You can ask them, will you please read the paragraph in question? So you can select that and highlight it for them to read. Once you're done annotating, what we'll do is we'll actually, let me jump back to that for you here. We'll actually add our own annotation here that shows how we'll remark them. So the remote video support provider, or if you're hosting your own arbitration, Now we can save this, and by saving this annotation, we now have a new exhibit number that has been stamped. If you wish, you can also save it with more information. For instance, annotated on Zoom by with the witness name. But once we save this, you'll see that we have the option to show in Finder on a Mac computer or show in your Windows folder. It will save as a picture, so you'll have to go into your folder like you would any other file to rename it to the proper exhibit number. But once you do, you now have a folder full of exhibits that have been annotated and marked up that can be used either to write your report or to share with the participants at the end of your arbitration. When you're ready, you'll click Stop Share, and that'll stop the screen share. And then you're ready to move on with your meeting. This is the easiest way to share documents and annotate them real time with your participants. So I'll give an example here. I'll clear the annotation that we just wrote, clear all drawings. That's the basics of screen sharing. That's the most important way to show exhibits and e-bundles. And then once they're all saved, the easiest way to reference them again. We're aware that using court reporters is not very common. So the easiest way to record would be to use Zoom's built-in recording for our meetings. We can transcribe this after the fact to make sure that we have all of the information and all of the transcripts for ourselves. So we'll talk briefly on how to create a Zoom recording. Before we start, we need to make sure that recording is enabled on our Zoom settings page. That's just the website that you log into on Zoom to schedule your meetings. You'll be able to find all of our saved recordings there as well. Once recording has been enabled, to initiate the recording, it's as simple as clicking the record button on the bottom of our screen. Once we click that button, we'll note that we have the ability to pause a recording or to stop the recording. We have it both on the top of our screen and on the bottom of our screen. It's important to note that Zoom will only record what you see as the host. If you initiated the screen recording, Zoom will only see what you see. If you wish to see more views, you can name someone co-host and have them record as well. It will record whatever the person who is recording can see. But once that video is done recording, Zoom will automatically save it to its cloud-based storage where you can move it from there. It's also possible to build in integrations with Google Drive and Dropbox to automatically save the recording to either of those file sharing services. Once you stop the recording, it takes a couple minutes for Zoom to polish that recording and have it ready to save. But during that time, you can reinitiate a recording. So that is a very easy and effective way of going around having a court reporter or having a formal recording setting. We can create our own transcripts and have video of the entire arbitration. So with those brief demonstrations done, I'm going to turn it back to Henry, and we're going to open it up to questions.
Thank you, Michael. That's helpful. If anyone has questions, please submit them via chat and we will answer them as they come in. So the first question, in evidentiary hearings, when the transcript is immediately available as live note, how should one connect so as to receive both the live note transcript and also see the witness being examined? If two screens are optimal, how do you set up the two screens to connect with each other? So I interpret that question as wanting to see the participants and wanting to see the exhibits that the participants are testifying about, while at the same time being able to see a concurrent or simultaneous transcription of the evidence if you have the testimony, if you have a court reporter. Michael, can you address how to accomplish that?
Yeah, so using LiveNote, I don't have a lot of experience using it simultaneously with Zoom, but I'm familiar with the general principles of it. You would start it as you normally would on your computer, and you'd use that service to stream, so you can rewind and see live time reports. But you would use a second monitor plugged into your computer next to Zoom, so you could have Zoom open on one and a second monitor running the live note for your transcriptions.
Thank you. Another question, how does one annotate exhibits where you are the counsel in the arbitration and not the arbitrator? So another way of asking that, Michael, is it only the host who can control annotations, or can the attorney representing a party or the witness herself be the one to do the annotations?
Yeah, that's a great question. Anyone can annotate, which is really great. So anyone that's viewing the screen share can annotate on the document. And then you can actually, using the More option in the controls when you're screen sharing, you can choose to label those annotations as well. So you can see who has annotated. But to answer your question, any participant of the meeting can annotate on top of the screen share.
Good. Someone submitted a question about the arbitral proceedings being private, but I think that their chat may have been cut off. So, how can live transcripts be produced? Is the next question. I know that they can be produced by recording, as Michael addressed, and then you can take a transcript, you can take a recording and have a court reporter transcribe it. But if you have simultaneous live note transcription going on, how then can you capture that either into a written document or into an electronic document?
So that is based mostly on how LiveNote operates, not necessarily so much as Zoom. So I'm less familiar with that. I do know that you can, it's still in beta for Zoom, but you can turn on subtitles, which can help you with your transcription. But I think the only way to have a live transcription that I'm aware of would be to use a court reporter that you can reference later on, or immediately after the court reporter has logged what has been said.
Thank you. So the next question, since arbitral proceedings are private, won't it be a challenge bringing in a video service provider such as Michael and giving them access to all the documents? I'll try to address that one. The remote video provider will sign a confidentiality, an NDA, just as anyone else who is in the arbitration would be bound by the privacy and the confidentiality of the arbitration. You can create whatever binding agreement you want with the remote video service provider, and he or she will agree to maintain the confidentiality. Because anything that is said at the hearing won't be cloaked with attorney-client privilege because it will be in the hearing room with the other counsel. It shouldn't be a problem with the privilege, and confidentiality can be taken care of by agreement. The next question. Yeah, will counsel have privacy in the breakout rooms if the meeting is being recorded? That's a good question. If you put the plaintiff's side in one breakout room and the defense side in another breakout room, how can the plaintiff's side be assured that what they're saying within that private breakout room isn't being recorded so that the defense can hear it or see it later?
Yeah, that's a great question. So like I said, with breakout rooms and screen recording, the recording is only what the host sees. So if it's the remote video support provider that's hosting or the arbitrator, nothing's getting recorded that's not on their screen. So if you're in a breakout room, private room, you will not be recorded unless the arbitrator is in that room with you. You are in a private space when you are in a breakout room, and the screen recording only captures what the host can see or the co-host who's recording. So a great way, you can also see on your screen if someone is recording. In the upper left-hand corner of your screen, it will say recording with a flashing red circle. So you can check that as well. But if you are in a breakout room without the arbitrator or host, you are not being recorded.
The next question is a question that we all have concerns about, which is how do you prevent a witness who is testifying remotely from being coached, whether it's from someone else in the room giving them gestures, or they're receiving emails or WhatsApp or text messages? A few ways to address that. One is to sequester the witnesses, have the witnesses be in their own breakout room or keep them in the waiting room so they can't hear what's being said at the hearing. The second is to have the parties agree that all witnesses will be physically sequestered. So they will be in a separate room from any attorneys And you can have agreement that witnesses will not take any communication devices with them into that separate room. If you are still distrustful of the other side, then you can set up a second screen in that room, or you can pull back the webcam so it shows the surroundings. And you could even have the witness occasionally take the laptop or the PC and rotate it to see the room. Ultimately, it is somewhat of an honor system because you can't be physically in the room with the witness.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, if I may, I find the waiting room is perfect for witnesses. When they're in the waiting room, they're totally alone. Even if other people are in the waiting room with them, they can't see one another. So it's great to leave them in the waiting room until right before they're needed, and then bringing them into the main session where I give them a little Zoom 101, make sure they're comfortable, and then I put them in the hearing room where the witness will turn their camera so you can see the room and make sure that no one else is there. It's also important to note that normally with witnesses, we require that they do not use a virtual background, just to make sure that if there is someone standing over their shoulder or someone else in the room, they'll be visible to all the participants.
The next question is, how do you set up multiple screens and how useful is this? Michael, what is the technological process for having multiple screens, multiple monitors?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it really depends on each type of computer that you use. Depending on the type of computer and the different ports that are in the back of the computer, most modern computers are sold with HDMI ports. So if you have multiple HDMI ports, you plug them into your computer, and your computer will recognize them and display on two screens. Then in your Zoom settings, you can actually make one screen that is just used for screen sharing, or on the contrary, if you'd rather use that screen for live note to be able to rewind and hear things over again, that's also beneficial. I find it very beneficial, to answer the second half of that question, to be able to see the screen share and have the full video. Because as you notice now with the screen share, as it takes up the whole screen, you lose your participant videos. They shrink into thumbnail size. So especially as the arbitrator, where you're trying to gauge authenticity in reality in a witness or the questioning lawyer, it's important to have their video as big as possible. So having that second screen for the screen sharing for the exhibits, I think is very vital.
The next question is about interpretations, and is live interpretation enabled on Zoom? I assume this means if you have someone testifying in a language other than the language in which the arbitration is being conducted, how do you have the real-time interpretation appear on Zoom? I'm going to let Michael answer that, but my assumption is that that is going to be something that occurs outside of Zoom. I don't know of an interpretation program or software embedded within Zoom.
Yeah, Zoom itself does not have that built in. It's not a feature that Zoom has. However, there are some pretty handy workarounds. For instance, if you have an interpreter that you like to use, or any interpreter, frankly, they can join the Zoom call, and the person who's speaking in the language that's unknown will actually mute themselves and call the interpreter on their cell phone, and the interpreter will interpret live on the Zoom call. So you can see the person who's speaking, even though you might not be able to understand their language, and hear the interpreter. Does that make sense, Henry?
That does, yep, thank you. So the next question, what is the configuration where parties are together and the arbitrator is attending remotely? Can parties other than the host record the meeting? So you have the plaintiff and the defendant, and you have their attorneys all in one conference room together, and the arbitrator is perhaps in a different city, and the arbitrator is attending remotely. Can the parties themselves control the recording, or does it have to be the arbitrator?
Yeah, that's another great question. That is managed through your settings on the Zoom webpage. Under the recordings tab, you can manipulate different settings about recording, what it's saving if you wanted to save screen shares as well, and also who can initiate a recording. Normally, I have the recording only set to the host. I believe there was a question earlier saying if you're in a breakout room, how do you know you're not being recorded? I find that just having the host being able to record alleviates that issue. You're not worried about counsel recording. You know that only the hearing room is being recorded.
And speaking of recording, the next question I think is directed to you, Dr. Agbelusi. Will we be getting a recording of this webinar?
Yes, we will.
Excellent.
Yes, we will. Yeah.
Good, thank you.
If I have another question, if someone is asking, is Microsoft Teams not more secure than Zoom?
Michael, do you know the answer to that?
I do, yeah. So Microsoft Teams is about as secure. Zoom has gotten a bad rap lately with the Zoom bombings that I'm sure you might have all heard about. But these things were almost entirely user error. For instance, sharing your invitation with the entire internet is normally not a good idea. Not enabling password protection or not enabling the waiting room. So all three of those things we never do with arbitrations. We're not inviting the whole internet. We are using embedded passwords and we are using the waiting room. With those three things done correctly without user error, Zoom is very secure. I can't speak to whether or not it's more secure than Microsoft Teams, but I can say that it is very secure. It's using a full 256-bit encryption end-to-end. And we also have control over data routing. If you guys have questions about data routing, I'd be happy to answer them. But in my experience, it's not as important as the waiting room, the password protection, and invitation control.
Michael, can you explain what end-to-end encryption means?
Yeah, it means that the Zoom client on your computer is also encrypting video. So before it even goes to the Zoom server, it's encrypted on your device before it leaves. And that's on both sides of the call. So that's what they mean by end-to-end encryption. There's no decryption until it hits your Zoom client.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Agbelusi asked if there's any difference that I've noticed in oral advocacy online. I thought that there was going to be a drop-off, a decline in the effectiveness of oral advocacy when we went from in-person to remote. I like doing things in person. I've been surprised at how effective it is. I find that the attorneys can convey their points just as well virtually, and I also find that the hearings tend to move more quickly. And I'm not sure what the reason for that is. Maybe because people are dressed a little bit more comfortably, at least from the waist down. But I've been impressed with how good oral advocacy is virtually. Can I ask a question? What are the predominant administrative bodies there that administer arbitrations? Is it the ICC? Is it the International Center for Dispute Resolution?
Yeah, we've got quite a number of them, and we've got plenty of ad hoc arbitrations. Mm-hmm. We've got the multi-law court arbitration, and we've got several institutions here. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. We appreciate it.
Presentation.
Dr. Agbelusi, one final slide. We do have a link to some handouts that are helpful in running an arbitration. Here they are on the screen. This is put together by the American Arbitration Association, the largest arbitration body in the US. It's also the body that partners with the International Center for Dispute Resolution. If you go to this website, this URL, they have written virtual hearing guides for arbitrators and parties that will be helpful in your practice. We thank everyone. If you have any other questions, or if I can ever be of service as an attorney or an arbitrator, or if Michael can ever be of service as a remote video support provider, please don't hesitate to contact us. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to be of help. And Dr. Agbelusi, thank you very much for inviting us. This has been very enjoyable.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we'll, could you just type out the link or the ADR in the chat room? The link for, yeah, that one. Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, so
we'll just leave that up for a minute.
Yeah, www.adr.org/COVID-19.
And then Dr. Agbalusi, is it correct that in addition to making a recording of this webinar available, that the slides themselves can be made available?
Oh, yeah, that'd be excellent. Yes, that'd be very excellent. Yes.
Good, thank you. So there you have contact information for me and for Michael if we can be of any help.
Okay. Yeah. Some was already asking me privately.
Okay.
Perfect. I'd be happy to answer any questions via email or phone call. Any questions you have regarding Zoom, I'd be happy to answer.
So thank you. Everyone be well.
Yes.
Stay safe and stay
So
healthy.
thank you, Henry. Thank you, Michael. Thank you to my chair and everyone for coming today. Obviously, we've seen the benefits of going virtual, especially if you have to host your platform in a very low value arbitration. And then if you have to go higher, then of course you get a third party provider. On the 29th of July, we'll have Opus 2, who is also another third party provider having a simulation arbitration for us, all for us to understand the benefits and the nuances of using virtual platforms to run arbitrations. I hope we've had a wonderful presentation. And as soon as the recording is ready, we'll send them out to everybody with a copy of the slides. Thank you all and have a wonderful evening. Mache, anything to add?
Okay. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, can I hear you now? Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Nothing more to add, only to thank Henry and
Michael?
Michael for the wonderful presentation, and also to express that we hope that whenever we need you again for similar presentation and to increase our knowledge on this process, you will oblige us. Thank you very much.
All right. Cheers. Have a good evening, everybody. Good night.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Goodbye.